Wow, I didn't realize how many people were here. Welcome. And I've been coming to Salk Institute for a long, long time. It makes me very nostalgic. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And I've got a fun role to play to be able to sort of meld both the food and the science and ask the question that you would want to ask if you were in my position. So we had a good time preparing and thinking about how we were going to do all this. And I hope that this will be first of many such meetings of science and food, because food is life. And the quality of food really is the quality of life. And so we'll learn more about that as we talk. I loved seeing Sume. Sume and I are very good friends, and we have visited with each other a lot. And actually, she's helped teach me Tai Chi. She's very good at it. I'm not. You know, the interest in food and the belief in food goes back to Hippocrates. He's the first one who said, "Let food be your medicine," way back. And he was raised on an island of spas called Kos. And all these different things have evolved, and down the road we have places like the Ranch and the Door, and Jonas and Françoise were frequent guests. Tomorrow night will be the premiere of the second session of Sume's KPBS show, Savor San Diego, and I really recommend it, because she has a philosophy of food and an understanding and a kind of historical reference that's unusual. She has a great cookbook that deals with the history that I've quoted a lot. And so you can watch episodes online at savorsdtv.com. Okay, so that I've done all the little things I promised I'd do now. Wellness has been the outstanding theme of my life. I come from a family of health nuts. We left Brooklyn during the Depression. We're talking about 1930. You can guess my age. I'm 91, shortly be 92. So I remember those years. But as a family of health nuts, when I was quite young, we moved to Tahiti because there was an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables. And there wasn't much in Brooklyn, where I was raised. And my mother's always had a garden, and we've always grown our food, so it does pay off. I can recommend it highly, and I'm grateful for gardening and community gardens. In Tahiti, because we had land crabs, Mother would rescue or have collected all the boats when there was a storm. Certain number of pirogues would be destroyed. She would buy them, and we had our garden in boats, because she could put metal kinds of things so that the crabs could not go and eat the vegetables. So we sort of connived to make sure we could always have vegetable fruits. And freshness is so important. And I talk a lot about the aliveness of food. You know, when you look at food, if you can imagine from the time it is wrenched from the ground or picked from the tree, the aliveness. And so we're really high on local, on seasonal, and alive. So we sort of try and imagine food when you look at it and think, is this really going to add to my life, my energy, my strength? It's very hard to apply that principle to McDonald's or any of the processed food, where food has been converted in great vats, and someplace in there, the aliveness went away. So try to have food as fresh as possible, as alive as possible, and that means local and seasonal and organic. And you all know about that, I would hope. When you look at food, I mean look at it. It's going to be you. It goes into your blood, into your sinews. It is you. And try to spend that moment looking at it, sort of understanding it and realizing it. There's nothing better, more alive, than some freshly steamed vegetables and little bits of that and that to season it, and you can almost imagine it. And raw, of course, is even more alive. So combining fresh from the garden ingredients, that fresh from the garden. And we're in Southern California, and it is easy to grow some of the greens and some of the simple things, you know. My kids were very, very small when we started growing radishes, their first experience. I'm sure most of you have been through that experience, but for children and grandchildren. So anyhow, I've been talking food since 1940. We started Rancho La Puerta in June of 1940. It's over 70 years ago. And then the Golden Door in 1958. And we focused on what is called slow foods, the slow food movements, which means you eat it slowly, you grow it slowly, you look at it slowly, you think about it slowly, and you chew slowly. The body does a better job of the food coming down the trench in little pieces than in big pieces. You just get twice as much value from your food without any more expense. So when you chew slowly, keep that in mind. And then cooking from scratch. It's cheaper, a lot cheaper, and a lot better. Because all the thing, when you buy these different ingredients and put them together, they've lost some of their aliveness. So we're not just talking of vitamins and minerals. And all the chefs here today share that philosophy. And the scientists create that philosophy. So I hope that as this evening proceeds, that you'll have that pleasure of feeling more secure in your knowledge of food and more secure in the importance of food. It is indeed your medicine. And we are, each of us, made by the food we eat. Air does this and that, water does that, but the food is the thing that gives us our muscles and our sinews and our body. Now, while I've known intuitively, perhaps that good food makes you feel good, I've not known much about the science behind it. I'm not a scientist. So some of what Sume was saying intrigued me and is worth experimenting and thinking about. And so we have the opportunity now to talk to the scientists and the chefs. Will you all come and be seated? I want to be able to see you. So when I ask these questions, I know who I'm asking them of. Anyhow, these are questions that were prepared by the staff, and I thought they were particularly good. Anyhow, we shared them and talked back and forth. Anyhow, so my first question is to Dr. Evans. You mentioned that our genes actually adapt to our diet. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And can they adapt when we change our diet?
Well, yes, it's a good thing and a bad thing. A very simple answer. It's good if you're eating good food, your genes do adapt. They adapt to any food that you bring in your body. So our body loves nutrients. Even if you bring in bad food, your genes will adapt to that. So, in that case, you'll get a more pro-inflammatory kind of body environment. But your genes do register whatever is coming into your body, every calorie, every nutrient. Your body is aware of it, and that's controlled by your genetics, and our body wants to grab all those nutrients. The adaptation comes that if you eat a very healthy diet, you'll progress and have sort of this low inflammatory state. If you eat a very high-fat, high caloric diet, you'll adapt to that as well, but you'll store a lot more calories in your adipose tissue. So that means you'll put on weight. And so what you bring into your body stays in your body unless you actually exercise and burn that off. And so you want to kind of, people are really good at moving and exercising. You want to do that, and you want to eat really good food to be in the best state, genetic state.
Listening to, and this was not part of the things, but the whole picture, this inflammatory, which we now know is so important and is key to so many. What is it in the last, what is it, 15, 20 years that they started talking about the importance? Well,
The American society and actually the world is getting heavier and heavier. And obesity and the obesity epidemic is really a pro-inflammatory epidemic. As we put on weight, the extra energy in our body is a sort of pro-inflammatory stimulus. And that's why you want to burn the excess calories if you can. They're sort of like a fuel. And if you overcharge the battery, it's not going to be so good. So it creates a pro-inflammatory state. And so obesity is just not something for appearance. It actually is a component of body health. By exercise and control of what you eat, you can maintain a much more healthy and lower inflammatory state. So chronic inflammation is a product in large part of our diet and whether we exercise or not. So eating healthfully and exercising on a regular basis is the best way to create a low inflammatory state and find that healthy point in our body. But so the genetics really adapted in a way that favors exercise and sort of moderate caloric input.
That's a perfect answer, the best answer I've heard on that, on inflammatory. That explains why. So we now know that, in other words, that I go and do Pilates 6 days a week, so it gets me there.
Days.
Well, it's known that if you even do just a moderate amount of exercise every day, that's very healthy. But a lot of Americans and others are sedentary, and that sedentary feature also our body adapts to. And so promoting exercise is really a good thing. So good for you.
Actually, is there an opportunity to kind of interact on different subjects here too? Because
Yes.
I'd like to pick up on something that Ron said that I think is very important.
Good.
And that has to do with the relationship between diet, obesity, and cancer, and specifically breast cancer is the one that I'd like to reflect on. Because there's an epidemic of breast cancer. 40,000 women will die of breast cancer this year. 200,000 will be diagnosed with it. And there's a relationship between obesity and breast cancer. And there's two components to it. The first component has to do with the inflammatory response that Ron was talking about. But there's a second response. And that is that in fat tissue, fat can actually produce hormones. And these hormones can regulate the growth of cells in the breast. In the case of obese women, they tend to produce estrogen for longer periods of time than do lean women. So you can imagine the following. As we evolved, women were having children when they were very, very young. They had to because of the dangers of the environment. The problem of being heavy was probably not an issue then. We were getting lots of exercise. There wasn't a lot of food around. But as time has gone on, and we've had supermarkets on every corner, and as you mentioned, we have McDonald's and other places that sell cheap calories that are very bad for us, obesity has come on the scene. Attendant with this is that women will be producing estrogen for longer periods of time than our bodies have evolved to respond to in a healthy way. And so there were two studies that were done over the past 5 years or so. One was called the Women's Intervention Nutrition Study, the WIN study, and the second one was one that was conducted in San Diego by John Pearson and his colleagues called the Women's Healthy Eating and Living Study, and there were two components to that. These were studies that dealt with women who had already been diagnosed with breast cancer, and the question was, is there anything we can do to prevent the recurrence? Because that's really where we want to be. Actually, where we want to be is to prevent the occurrence of breast cancer to begin with. But that's an extremely difficult kind of study to do. So this one was, can we prevent recurrence? And I'm not going to go through all the data. I'll tell you just one little snippet. And that is, from all the things that they studied, they tried to reduce fat. There were two things that were very important. One is that women should eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables per day, but that wasn't the only thing. That as an independent variable didn't score significantly. It had to be combined with exercise. So 5 portions of fruit and vegetables, along with exercise, independent of weight, reduce the risk of recurrence by 50%. And that to me was remarkable, and that's something you should all know about.
That's I'm glad you added that, because unless we exercise, we're going against nature, because life demanded movement. We couldn't live without moving.
That's how we got
Only
our
now.
food. That's how we got our food.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next question I have is for Dr. Jeff Wall.
I'll give it to Dr. Ruben Shaw.
More and more we hear about inflammation affecting our long-term health. Dr. Wheel has even created an anti-inflammatory diet. Can you give us some more specifics on the dangers of inflammation and how it's related to diet?
Well, I think actually we've kind of covered that.
Yes, I know that.
I think to get some of, maybe to
Yeah, I
get
should-
some
My
of the
answer
rubber
is no.
hitting the
Ron has
road,
answered
yeah.
it so extremely.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
Ruben has something to say.
Okay, so we'll go to Chef Denise. Wait a minute.
One little thing I'd add to that is that, we've talked a lot about cancer and how inflammation can contribute to cancer risk and different types of cancer, but inflammation also contributes to a number of other diseases. This contributes to type 2 diabetes, this contributes to risk and phenotype of how bad, a large number of different severity of neurological diseases, arthritis, it's a large number, a large swath of human suffering, in fact, can be tied back to inflammation in different states. So being able to reduce inflammation across the board benefits not just cancer risk, but actually a great number of diseases.
Okay, Denise, it's your turn. In the video, both scientists and chefs refer to food as medicine, as nourishment for the body. Yet in America today, food seems to do more harm than good. And while most people know they should eat more vegetables, they don't. Why do you think it is so difficult to get people to properly nourish their body?
Well, first of all, I think that we've really forgotten where food comes from. And the most important thing that Mother Earth has given us is a soil and all the microorganisms that are living in that soil. And so there are many people now that don't know where carrots came from. And I include myself because I've been a chef for 20 years and I've worked in really big kitchens where we ordered things because we wanted them. And so we forgot what seasonality was. And since we forgot that, and it was a #1 rule that, I don't know, maybe when you went to culinary school or anywhere you said, you buy
I went to
food.
film school. But.
Oh. That's what makes him a great chef. They tell us that you should buy things in season because they're at their prime and they're at their cheapest cost, correct? But we forgot all about that because all of a sudden we could have truffles whenever we wanted, or strawberries whenever we wanted. And I think that's really the biggest movement. We're just consumed with being able to have what we want when we want to have it. And the reality is that the world isn't like that. And we should really go back to, spending time with our grandparents. Or I'd love to spend time with my grandparents. And I live in Mexico right now. I'm very honored to be able to work for Deborah at the ranch and at the cooking school and on 6 acres of organic vegetables where you hear the birds and it's part of the ranch. And you hear, they ask us about coyotes. Yes, we have coyotes and we have rabbits and we have a balance and we have bees. And all those insects that we talked about today that you find maybe in your arugula, is part of nature, and that balance is also what you need to eat better. And believe it or not, you become really happy and you look younger.
That's a good answer. And the next question is from Michelle Lurac. Our grocery stores are abundant with foods, yet most consumers tend to repeatedly purchase the same limited variety of personal favorites. What advice would you give for approaching unfamiliar foods? In other words, how can the average person turn foraging into a habit?
Well, I fight this battle every day in my own home with my husband, so who would prefer to choose the foods that he likes that are fast and convenient. And I think this is a follow-on to what you said, which is that people are a little bit intimidated by new foods, right? One of the things I think that's a really great program is the CSA Farm to Table box, where you work with a local farm and you get a box of produce. You don't know what you're getting, and so but it's okay, because it's sort of like a journey, an exploration. You can look up, you can find out about things. I mean, you can, now we're so lucky, you can go online. Today, for example, you might wonder why I'm a dessert person is on this particular stage while we're talking about healthy food, but today the desserts, yes, we brought cupcakes, but I also brought, and they're vegan and gluten-free and low glycemic. But all of the other desserts that we brought tonight are vegan, gluten-free, and have no refined sugars. So you can make things better. If your husband, wife, kid, grandmother wants a carrot cake, well, you can make that same food for them in a better way. In the same vein, you can find out about new ingredients. What's coconut sugar? What's sucanat? What can I add? What's flax meal? What's chia? What does it do for me? You know, if you hear someone talking about it and you have no idea what it is, go online, look it up, ask a chef, ask a scientist, what does this mean? What can this do for me? Because there really is an enormous amount of information available now to us. We're so fortunate. You know, you don't have to necessarily crack the library, you simply have to go online. And you can reach out and try new foods and small things. Add a little turmeric to every meal. I mean, we all know what a wonderful ingredient this is. So it's antioxidant. I've also read cancer. Yeah, so it's there's so much that you can do. So I try not to be intimidated by any ingredient, and I actually try to go out and find new ones, read as much as I can about them, and try to figure out new ways to incorporate them into dishes I already make.
Good answer. And the next, this one's not, it's just sort of all of you or any of you. In the video, Sume mentioned choosing foods based on how she feels. When we talk about food at the ranch, we ask our guests to ask their body, what does your body need? And both feel and need are very connected. So Sume mentioned choosing foods based on how she feels, and that makes sense. Yet for many people, satisfying how they feel leads to consuming an entire bag of potato chips. I know about that. Or draining a couple of glasses of wine. Why do we have these cravings, and how can we trust our body to tell us what it needs? Who wants to answer that?
Next question? No. I think, actually, first, I think with Sume especially, her body is in balance. She eats properly the way she should, and she can listen to her body, and her body tells her what she needs because everything is working the way it should be. Obviously, if you get yourself out of balance, then your body starts craving those things like potato chips and all those things that kind of give you a little bit of a high, you know, the carbohydrate high and things like that. So I think obviously the first step would be getting yourself in balance before you can really start listening to what your body tells you.
Who else would like to answer?
That's comments on that too. I think it's important that you switch to foods that you really, really love. So when people come to me to want to start tapping into at least raw or vegan side dishes, for me, I'll oftentimes bring them into the gateway of dessert. because I can make you a gluten-free brownie. Michelle can attest. Not only gluten-free, but made from sprouted almonds and sweetened with ripe dates and has raw cacao powder in it. That's one of the highest things in antioxidants we can put into our body. So if you're making a switch to health, you want to start with things that you would naturally crave, right? If you crave Doritos, try kale chips, right? We do some kale chips that I know Michelle's tried those too.
They taste like Doritos.
It tastes like Doritos, right? We call it Doritos. There's always a healthy, fun, adventurous way to tackle switching from your craving foods and get into something healthier. And if you don't, if you try to avoid those food cravings that you have, let's say that you really love mac and cheese, right? That's a good example. If I was sad or sick, my mom made me mac and cheese, right? She didn't know any better. I've forgiven her. I hope you do too. There's a way to make a delicious broccoli and quinoa mac and cheese with nutritional yeast that is phenomenal, and it's warm and it's creamy and it's satisfying. And if you don't satiate your heart need for that craving, you're just going to keep relying. That's why people eat the whole bag of Doritos, because it's much easier to finish a bag of Doritos than it is to solve your stressful problems in life. It's an immediate gratification, right? And so food is so easy to get that instead of solving a problem, we can just distract ourselves with food and we can get the bottom of that bag of Pringles really, really quickly. But I'm here to tell you that if you are adventurous and you are fun and you want to satisfy your palate with your cravings, there's a new way to do it. There is a new way to eat sweets. Michelle is a living example of that. There's a new way to have her Doritos. I suppose I'm a living example of that. And Mexican food, I mean, that was one of the things that growing up in San Diego, oh my gosh, I love it, you know, and you go out too late with your friends and you have a carne asada burrito late at night and soon enough you're packing on pounds in all the places you don't want them. And along comes someone like Isabel who can take those foods that we all grew up on in this neighborhood and make them healthy and help us live longer in a way that is beyond satisfying. A 2 a.m. carne asada burrito cannot beat anything this woman can make, so.
And Isabel wants to speak up.
Yes, yes. I think it's about balance on your plate and also in your lifestyle. I know if I am exercising and trying to eat right, I feel like eating better. I feel like having brown rice and steamed vegetables and some good protein. But I also love food, so I have to have something with it that makes me want to eat it. It has to taste good for me. So I do it with simple sauces or some kind of salsa or something spicy. But I know if I go out and I stay out too late and I'm drinking, the next morning I feel like just a little bit. But I feel like Coke and a cheeseburger. So, and that's going to happen every once in a while. So I think if you just try to do the best you can and eat well when you can, exercise when you can, and the same with your kids, you know, teaching them to eat that way. I know my kids when they were younger, I would put vegetables and good things in front of them, and they wouldn't touch it. I mean, they did not touch it, but I always put it in front of them. Now that they're adults, they eat that, and it's because they were used to seeing it, and little by little, they grew to like these things. So it's about education, too, educating our kids, and teaching people how to cook is also a big part of it, because I know when I'm traveling, it is so hard to eat well. Unless you're by one of our restaurants and you're okay. In general, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
But so you have to learn how to cook for yourself and make it easy. You know, keep it, you know, like we do in restaurants. It doesn't take us 3 hours to prepare your plate of food. We do a little bit of work beforehand. So if people did that at home once a week, you know, you go shopping and you prep a couple things, it'd make it that much easier for you to cook at home for yourself and to cook healthier for your family and for your friends, and just makes everybody feel better and look better, like I said.
Isabel, yours is the restaurant I've been to most often. I love Mexican food,
I'm honored.
and I love what you do there.
Thank you.
You said you could not get your kids to eat vegetables? Did
When they were really young. It was
I know.
really
But
hard.
has anyone here got their
Joy's
kids
good
to
at
eat?
it. Her son eats so good.
Because I have no problem with my kids because their taste buds were not polluted or whatever word you want to use by
That's
all the
what
fast
happens
foods.
with my kids,
So
yeah.
I had no problem with my kids, but my grandkids, That's a totally different story. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, Deborah, I just wanted to comment. As I looked at the questions for this panel, I was so interested in one of them, which had to do with the difference between hunger and craving. Right?
Yes, very different.
So they're very different things. So hunger is something that comes from your stomach through enzymes that we can tell you and hormones that we can tell you about, but that's too much information for now, and you want to get to the wonderful food out there.
No, but it's very interesting.
But a craving is something very, very different. A craving is first something that takes experience. You have to know what it is that you want in order to crave it. You have to have had experience with it before. And I read a study, this is really interesting. 100% of women last year had a craving, only 70% of men. Now I thought that was kind of interesting. But let's talk about what that, okay, you didn't have a craving last year? It obviously didn't include you. 100% of women, 70% of men, but there's a big difference in what they crave. So what do you think the women crave? Exactly right, sweets.
Yes.
Crave sweets. And what did the men crave?
Football.
Exactly right. I'm not exactly sure why this happened, but that's the way that it came out. But here's an interesting thing. Both of those together, the fats in chocolate, the carbohydrates and fats and the savory things, they both do something very similar, and that is that they actually activate the same part of our brain that narcotics do, the opiate receptors. And so then it becomes very important to entrain ourselves to eat the right kind of food so that when we get a craving, we're craving the right kind of things, and we can still activate those same parts of the brain and produce serotonin. The reason we get cravings is because of two things. We're really stressed, or we're really bored. And you can reduce stress and boredom by exercise.
Wow. And
Just a thought.
I think you've done a magnificent job, and we thank you all. Thank the panel and the... And they'll be all around, so you'll be able to ask them questions and get all kinds of advice and exercise.
Yes. And vegetables.